Hi. My family never lost their home. My great-grandparents were never suffered during the British rule. My grandparents were never harmed during the partition of India-Pakistan. My parents were never injured in any violent attacks. In every single way, I'm lucky. And yet, I carry a history I never lived. I've traveled a lot, from being raised in India for 8 years, then living in the Netherlands for 5. I've pretty much had an international exposure from a young age. I've met a lot of different people from different backgrounds, and most of my friends are NRIs, Indian by blood, but raised outside the country. Some of them were kind of embarrassed about it, embarrassed about the fact that they were Indian. They leaned into the Western culture, avoided speaking their mother tongue, and even made fun of Indian traditions that weren't something to be laughed about. I never felt that way. In fact, the more I learned about India, our history, its history of being colonized, the Mughal invasions, even my own state, Maharashtra's battle and resilience, the more I grew to love learning about them. And with that love came something else: rage. Rage at the injustice my country and its people suffered. Rage at the fact that so much of it had been ignored, brushed off, left out of everyday conversation. I wanted to speak about it. I wanted to demand justice, even if it was only through awareness. And then one day, a friend of mine asked me a question that cut deep. No, wait. Okay. If your family and ancestors didn't literally suffer during the British rule, no slavery, no traumatic past, no violence, why are you so affected by it? Why do you feel the need to speak about something you haven't personally suffered from? Just let it go. What happened to India is in the past. What can you do now? And that question, it left me speechless. For the first time, I wondered, maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't in the right to speak about it. I even started thinking it didn't matter anymore, that because I hadn't suffered, my voice didn't count. So the question I asked myself, if I haven't suffered or lived through the pain, do I still have the right to speak about it? I began to question everything. Who am I? Does my identity even matter anymore? Yes, I'm Indian. Yes, I'm Maharashtrian. But I haven't endured any pain comparable to what others have endured. What makes me a proud Indian when I carry none of history's scars? The things I once celebrated, my nation's resilience, our ability to rise from centuries of invasion and oppression, the things that once inspired my pride. Whatever urgency I once felt, whatever rage I carried, it was all suddenly blown away. It felt as if someone had taken my right. It felt as if someone had quietly taken away my right to care. And this made me realize there is a fine line between speaking with and speaking for others. So the question I asked myself, if I haven't suffered or lived through the pain, do I still have a right to speak about it? Before I could move forward to answer that question, I needed to understand the role history itself plays. How does the past still find a way to speak even today? Before I could move forward to answer that question, I needed to understand, what is history? So let's ask ourselves, what is history? Yes, it's the study of our past, but it's far more than just a bunch of dates, rulers, or wars. History itself is a blueprint that shapes our present. So saying it's in the past doesn't hold up, it's illogical. As Martin Luther Jr. King once said, we are not the makers of history, we are made by history. So everything around us, the system and the structure we live today, are all a result of history's outcome. Take colonialism as an example. Colonialism didn't just wound countries, it rewired them. It flipped entire social structures, created hierarchies, and left behind invisible scars. When you really think about it, colonial influence wasn't just part of our history. It runs deep into the very systems we live in today. Language, for example. India, a country with over 19,000 different mother tongues, only has 2 official languages, English and Hindi. Still, English is seen as smarter or more sophisticated when spoken. Studies even show that fluent English speakers, especially men, are around 34% more than non-English speakers. And for women, the returns are about 22 to 10%. So yeah, language isn't just how we speak, it decides who gets spoken, who gets heard, and who doesn't. Then, fashion. Western clothes are seen as upper class or sophisticated again. Meanwhile, our own Indian attire, something we should actually be proud of, we're ashamed to wear. More than half of India's youth population follows Western trends. Education, same story. English medium schools are hyped to be better quality compared to other regional schools. Luxury brands, we worship international brands rather than focusing on our Indian startups that rarely get the same hype. So when someone says the past is in the past, I don't think that's true. The past is still very much here, present in the way we speak, in the way we dress, and even in the way we dream. This is colonialism's silent legacy. It never left, it grew. It adapted with us. We are still living in its aftershocks. To say it's in the past is like to ignore that it's the frameworks of today's present. Through colonialism comes historical trauma. Now, what I mean by historical trauma, it isn't only the pain experienced by the people who lived during that event, it's the damage affecting the coming generation in line. Like a ripple effect, it shapes their values, opportunities, and even self-worth. We often focus a lot on the disadvantages, about who is harmed, but rarely talk about the flip side. Who continued to benefit? Some researchers call this as historical privilege. The advantages passed down over generations because certain people had power, resources, and freedoms while others were denied. Peggy McIntosh, an American activist, describes this as the invisible knapsack. It describes, basically, the unearned things we carry without noticing. Not just money, but access, safety, confidence, and the feeling of belonging. It also shows up in the Indian context. Historical privilege might look like having access to quality education and networks you can step into easily because your family remained stable economically. The ease with which we speak English, a colonial legacy that still holds social power while other regional languages remain undervalued. These advantages might seem normal, but they're not. They're systemic, they're real, and it's the opposite of historical trauma. Instead of pain being passed down, it's opportunity, it's privilege. And once you acknowledge that, you inherit a responsibility, a power almost. A power almost. It's yours to choose it or to keep it, but because the past still shapes the inequalities and the sufferings of today, those who benefit from it, they are positioned so uniquely that they have the ability to challenge them. So by staying silent, you're not exactly being neutral, you're letting the same system that you benefit from continue, allowing them to keep running and protecting them. I used to wonder I used to think that my anger at colonialism was borrowed, something like secondhand. Like I didn't deserve to feel a certain way because my family wasn't devastated. It's true, we didn't lose our land, we didn't lose our language, we remained stable economically during violent times. But this is exactly what history handed me, privilege. I had stability, I had security. And that is what we must acknowledge, privilege. Privilege itself is a microphone. And that is where the fine line appears. The question isn't, do I have the right to speak? The question is, what am I doing with the advantages history handed me? Am I amplifying voices already out there, or am I overshadowing them? To speak for is to assume ownership of that pain, is to assume that the stories you're telling is your own, but they aren't. To speak with is to carry someone's truth forward. It would be harmful for you to stand on the stage and pretend to tell the stories that aren't yours. That's to speak for. It is how we choose to engage with that trauma as being outsiders to that direct suffering. I repeat, it is how we choose to engage with that trauma as being outsiders to that direct suffering. And this is how we walk that fine line. Let me show you through an example. Imagine you're talking about bullying in your school. So the first thing you're going to do is acknowledge what you didn't experience. You can start off by admitting that the things you never felt or you never experienced. For example, I've never been targeted the way some people have. I've never woken up scared to come to class. This is you simply recognizing the safety you inherited. Second, share the platform. Instead of retelling the stories from your perspective, you're going to voice out their own in their exact words. You can start, for example, maybe a classmate said, I felt invisible for months. Rather than you overshadowing their experience, you're revealing what their experience is actually like and what it was. Third, add to the conversation without making yourself the center. So your role isn't to end with, and that made me realize. Your role is to point out their experience and in what it truly represents. You're not the hero, you're the stage for them to speak. So the key takeaway is not to end with your empathy, but to allow their voices to be heard. The 3 points to remember: acknowledge what you did not experience, share the platform, and add to the conversation without making yourself the hero. So when I used to wonder, if I haven't suffered or lived through the pain, do I still have the right to speak about it? But the fact that I even get to ask that very question is because of privilege itself. My family didn't have any scars, we didn't suffer, but that is exactly what I'm grateful for. That is the privilege history handed me. So the question isn't, do I have the right to speak? It's, what am I doing with these advantages that history handed me? Because privilege isn't shame, it isn't guilt. It's a microphone. And I didn't get to hold it, but I can choose what to use it for. So the real question is, what will you do with yours? Think about it. Thank you.